Welcome, everybody. Today we are on our day 4 of our 5 days of wellness, and today's focus is balance. So we invited registered dietitian Kristen Simmonds with Aramark to join us today to do a balanced nutrition talk. To kind of round out, we're doing a balanced fitness talk later on today, and we thought let's start it off with nutrition. So Kristen, what do you have for us today?
Yes, so today we're going to be talking all about balanced eating. So I will set up my slides here.
Awesome.
Let me see. Okay. Sorry, give me 1 second.
No problem. And I just wanted to mention that if anybody does have any questions, they can ask us in the group chat, and we'll have myself or Michelle will pop on and check to see if anybody has any questions. I know we have some that we sent out earlier. We asked the students if they had any questions, and we've had some return. But in this live setting, we'd like to offer that as well. If anybody does have questions, to drop them in the chat, and we'll ask you when you're finished.
Okay, absolutely. Sounds great. Does everything look okay on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So yes, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in Seneca College's Wellness Week. I'm definitely very excited to be presenting today. So yes, my name is Kristen Simmonds. I'm a registered dietitian, and for today, we'll be talking all about balanced eating, and we'll really focus on the basics of good nutrition and just general healthy, balanced eating practices. So with today's presentation, I really wanted to take things kind of back to basics. I find there's a lot of confusion and misinformation out there when it comes to balanced eating and receiving good nutrition. So today's presentation is perfect if you are someone who's interested in eating a balanced diet, but really don't quite know where to start. So we'll go over how good nutrition influences our health and well-being, what really defines balanced eating, what that actually means, the macro and micronutrients that are kind of included as part of a balanced diet, how to actually build a healthy balanced plate using Canada's Food Guide. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about how to best sort of implement positive behaviors that really support healthy, balanced eating practices. Now, in general, most of us already kind of know what healthy eating is all about, right? You've heard more vegetables and fruits, less protein, less refined foods, and less sugar, just to kind of name a few reasons. But when it comes to having good nutrition, many of us really don't know the full details of the benefits of good nutrition and how to go about actually achieving it. So good nutrition means your body is getting all the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals it needs to really work at its best. And this is typically achieved by eating a diet that's full of a variety of nutrient-rich foods that provide some sort of benefit to our health. And really, your food choices each day do affect your health, how you feel today, tomorrow, and in the future. And good nutrition and balanced eating too is also a really important part of just leading a general healthy lifestyle. So definitely combined with physical activity, your diet can really help you to reach and maintain a healthy weight, reduce your risk of chronic diseases, and really just promote your overall health and well-being. And then too, I just want to note, good nutrition also helps to increase our energy levels throughout the day, support your mental health, strengthen your immune system, improve skin bone health, and many other reasons as well. Now, as most of you are probably aware, there of course is significant health data available to showcase the connection between poor nutrition and chronic disease risk. And when I say chronic disease risk, I'm really referring to those long-term health conditions such as cardiovascular disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, obesity, osteoporosis, and several other conditions. So adults who eat a healthy, balanced diet really tend to live longer and have a lower risk of developing these chronic diseases. And even for those who already have a chronic condition, good nutrition can still definitely help people manage their conditions and even prevent further complications. Now, all that being said, many Canadians, however, do not have a healthy, well-balanced diet. So to prevent the onset of these diseases, we must first identify, what balanced eating is, the nutrients we need to ensure we have good health, and the strategies we can use to really obtain these nutrients in our diet. So the concept of balanced eating in our diet can really mean a few different things. But I'd say in general, when we're referring to a balanced diet, that typically means that the foods you usually eat provide all the nutrients your body needs. And in doing so, this lowers your risk of developing nutrient deficiencies and optimizes your health in the long term. So really, I'd say just a balanced diet contains lots of different foods in varying amounts to ensure your body receives all the nutrients it requires to really function at its best. So what exactly are the nutrients our body needs to achieve good health for the long term? And I've kind of already mentioned the term nutrients a few times already when speaking about balanced eating. But this term, it really refers to many different substances found in food that our bodies require to really perform at its best. And when talking about nutrients, oftentimes we're referring to two categories of nutrients. We have macronutrients, which are carbohydrates, proteins, and fat, and micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals. So I want to spend a few minutes and just take a closer look at all of these now. Now, macronutrients are a group of 3 nutrients. So they make up carbohydrates, protein, and fat, and they provide our bodies with energy. And what this means is that essentially they provide calories. So since these nutrients give us energy, they're actually needed in the greatest amounts and really make up the bulk of our diet. And for most people, carbohydrates do tend to be the body's main source of energy. So carbohydrates are found in so many different foods and can really be found in 3 different forms. So they can be found as fiber, starches, or sugars. So for example, fiber is something that tends to be found in foods like beans, bran, fruit, nuts and seeds, and whole grains. Something like starch could be found, of course, in a lot of breads, pastas, potatoes, rice, beans, and any food really that's made with some sort of flour. And then lastly, we have sugars, which I know we all know about. And this is definitely found in things like fruit, dairy products, some vegetables, but of course, most oftentimes it tends to be added to a lot of prepackaged foods. And many of the foods I just mentioned do contain carbohydrates, but they also contain other important nutrients too, like vitamins and minerals. But unfortunately, many people tend to eat highly processed forms of carbohydrates, and most of which tends to be lacking a lot of fiber, vitamins, and minerals, and oftentimes contains excessive amounts of sugars. So examples of these types of foods would be things like white bread, pasta, pizza, baked goods, crackers, cookies, soft drinks, the list goes on really. And having a lot of these processed foods in our diet, which again tend to be really high in sugar, they can definitely increase our risk of developing tooth decay, weight gain, and even some chronic diseases as well. So overall, when it comes to making healthier carbohydrate choices as part of a balanced diet, we really want to make sure we're consuming whole grains primarily as much as possible and are having a variety of vegetables and fruits in our diet. Now, protein is another important macronutrient to include as part of a balanced diet, and it really helps us to build and repair body tissues and is a structural component of organ tissues, muscle, hair, skin, nails, and blood plasma. So there are so many sources of protein to choose from, and oftentimes they're either derived from animals or plants. So many of us know some animal sources of protein would include foods such as beef, poultry, pork. We have eggs, dairy products like milk and cheese, and fish and seafood as well. Plant-based sources, on the other hand, would include foods like beans and legumes, nuts and seeds, whole grains, and even soy products like tofu, tempeh, and edamame. And plant-based sources of protein, I find, they're really quite popular right now. You maybe hear about them a lot in the news or read about them on social media. And the reason they're so popular is because they really tend to be lower in saturated fat than animal protein. And they're also a lot higher in fiber, vitamins, and minerals. But I would say in general, really, for the most part, Canadians who eat a mixed diet of both animal and plant-based proteins are likely getting enough protein. There's really, for the most part, no concern there. But protein intake really starts to become a bit of a concern for people who begin to eliminate animal-based foods from their diet, like vegetarians or vegans. So overall, I would just say that ensuring there is a good source of protein at every meal and snack is an essential part of balanced eating and something we really want to focus on. And then two, fats are another important nutrient to consider as part of a balanced diet. So fats have many roles in our bodies, and they're often used to make steroids and hormones. They also provide structure to cell membranes, and they help our body actually absorb certain vitamins. Now, many of us have heard that there are three different kinds of fat found in foods. So that includes trans fat, saturated fat, and unsaturated fat. And these three fats have different effects on your health. So first, we have trans fats. These can be found naturally in some animal-based foods like beef and dairy products, but there are also a lot of industrial-produced trans fats that are formed during food processing. And this is usually added to improve shelf life and textures of some foods like margarine, vegetables, shortenings, any sort of like commercially baked goods as well. Then we also have saturated fats. And then again, these foods are found in things like dairy products, meats, and oils like butter, lard, and shortening. Then lastly, unsaturated fats tend to be found in foods like nuts and seeds, avocados, fatty fish, and vegetable oils. So overall, I would say, trans fats and high intakes of saturated fats are really not that great for our health. There's a lot of research to show that these fats really contribute to the onset of cardiovascular disease, as both trans fats and saturated fats can actually raise the level of LDL cholesterol, or what's known as bad cholesterol, in our blood. And this can cause plaque to build up in our blood vessels. Now, on the other hand, unsaturated fats are seen as being good for our health because they help to lower the level of LDL cholesterol in our blood, thereby reducing your risk of heart disease. So I would say, this type of fat in particular is really most important to include as part of a healthy diet. So you really want to focus on making food choices that contain unsaturated fat. And you also really want to try and have just smaller amounts of the foods that contain unsaturated and trans fats. You can still include them as part of a healthy balanced diet, but you just want to have them in smaller amounts. And overall, that's kind of what balanced fat intake sort of looks like. Now, micronutrients are groups of vitamins and minerals that really don't provide our body with energy, but they're definitely very important for normal functioning of our body. And their main function is to assist with the chemical reactions that occur in cells. And there are a variety of vitamins found in foods that we eat, and really every vitamin has its own unique function within the body, so I won't go through them all. But in general, I would say, vitamins are really essential for normal metabolism, growth and development, and regulation of cell function. And really, they work together with enzymes to ensure proper functioning of cellular processes. In general, I would just say, the vitamins that we can find in food would be vitamins A, B, C, D, E, and K. And minerals too, these are also necessary for the function of enzymes in the body. And some minerals are actually needed in greater amounts than others. And similar to vitamins, really every mineral has its own unique function. But some examples of minerals that you may have seen would be items such as like sodium, iron, calcium, and potassium. So overall, I would say eating a diet that's really rich in whole foods and full of variety can help us to ensure that we're receiving an appropriate amount of micronutrients. Now, although balanced eating means kind of getting all the nutrients, vitamins, and minerals our body needs to really work at its best, it's important to remember that there is no single food that can provide you with all the nutrients your body needs. So I actually find one of the most common questions I often get from students is, what is the best and easiest way for me to get all my nutrients at once? So I kind of say, well, in order to get everything we need, we really have to balance our food intake and eat a variety of foods from all the food groups. And the simplest way for us to get all the nutrients we need from food is to follow the recommendations of Canada's Food Guide. So I don't know if anyone has seen the new food guide, but Canada's Food Guide really highlights the two main components of healthy, balanced eating. So what we eat and how we eat. And the first part of the food guide really dives into the recommendations relating to the specific foods to include as part of a healthy diet. So I kind of would say it provides really a visual representation of how to actually build a healthy, balanced plate using what they call the plate model. And essentially, it kind of walks us through the steps that we can take to really build the ideal proportions of food groups on our plate. So the first component of a balanced plate that I want to start with is the vegetables and fruits food group. Now, as many of us know, vegetables and fruits are an extremely important part of healthy eating because they contain such a great variety of nutrients. These foods, they contain a lot of fiber, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, all of which play an important role in reducing the risk of heart disease, cancer, and so many other chronic conditions. So for these foods in particular, the general recommendation is to really make about half of your plate vegetables and fruit. And this can include really any sort of vegetable or fruit you'd like. But I'd say, it's really good to try different textures, colors, and shapes just to add some sort of variety to your diet. But keep in mind too that vegetables and fruits don't necessarily need to be fresh. And I always get this question from students too. So really, fresh, frozen, and canned vegetables and fruits can all be healthy options. I would just say that, when purchasing these items, you really want to purchase canned fruits that are packed in water and not sugar, and ideally canned vegetables that are lower in sodium. And also, too, I wanted to note that you'll see, the food guide recommends choosing whole or cut vegetables and fruits instead of juice. And the reason for this is because fruit juice tends to be very high in sugars and oftentimes is lacking the fiber that we need that comes from whole fruit. So this item is really encouraged to be consumed in moderation. Now, the second part of the balanced plate really focuses on the protein foods food group. So for these foods in particular, it's recommended to make about a quarter of your plate protein foods. Now, like I mentioned, protein foods are important to include in our diet because they help build and repair muscle and bone. So within this category, again, there are two types of protein sources to choose from, animal-based and plant-based, right? And current evidence is really showing that it's best for us to consume plant-based protein sources more often in our diet, since they provide more fiber and less saturated fat compared to animal-based proteins. And I find I tend to get a lot of questions from students about this category in particular when looking at the food guide. And really, they ask kind of whether or not meat and dairy are still recommended by the food guide. So I just want to take a second to kind of clarify, meat and dairy, they definitely are still shown on the food guide and they are recommended as good sources of protein. They're really just not displayed quite as prominently as before because there's now such a large emphasis on the consumption of plant-based proteins due to their high fiber and low saturated fat content. But really, in general, I would say, regardless of which type of protein source you're choosing at your meal, you should always ensure that there is a sufficient amount of protein at your meal, again, making up about a quarter of your plate. And the last part of the balanced plate is the whole grains food group. And here the emphasis is on choosing whole grain foods over white refined grains. So for these foods, the recommendation is to make about a quarter of your plate whole grains. And whole grains are specified in particular because they have much more nutritional benefits than white refined grains. So whole grains include all parts of the grain kernel, and they have a lot more nutrients like fiber, B vitamins, and minerals, all of which really, again, can help reduce our risk of developing, heart disease, cancer, and many other chronic diseases. So just to mention, some examples of whole grain products would include foods like whole grain pasta and bread, brown rice, quinoa, oats, barley, farro, fika. There are so many whole grains out there to try. Now, not only is it important for us to be mindful of our food choices, but we really want to take the time to be aware of our beverage choices too. So when it comes to our beverages, it's really best to make water our drink of choice. And drinking plenty of water every day is important for our health because, water is definitely a key component of several physiological processes in the body. Everything from regulating blood flow to muscle contractions to the uptake of glucose and amino acids into our cells. There are so many functions it's involved in. And of course, as we know, there are so many beverage choices available to Canadians, right? So drinks like pop, juice, energy drinks, kombucha, coffee, and so many others are available. But, many of these beverage choices, oftentimes they tend to be quite high in calories, sodium, and sugar. And this is why water is a much better choice to have. And it's a really great way to quench your thirst without any sort of extra calories, sodium, or sugar. But that being said, I always like to mention that there are also several types of beverages that do contain nutrients that are beneficial to our health. So for example, drinks like 100% fruit and vegetable juices, fresh smoothies, black coffee, and tea, they are all good to include as part of a healthy diet. And, this is kind of where that idea of balance really comes in, right? Like ideally, we want most of our beverage choices to be water with, different options added in kind of every now and there as a treat. And while there's a lot of information about the foods we should be eating as part of a healthy, balanced diet, it's really important for us to remember that balanced eating is about simply more than the foods we eat, right? It's also really important for us to make a habit of eating a variety of healthy foods each day while also being aware of our eating behaviors. And this is where the second part of the food guide really comes into play. So Canada's Food Guide takes a closer look at the recommendations relating to our eating behaviors, attitudes, and lifestyle. And it really focuses on where, when, why, and how we eat. So Canada's Food Guide encourages us to really think beyond everyday food choices and to reflect on our eating behaviors. We should be making lifestyle choices and developing habits that really support our ability to receive good nutrition and really just to benefit our overall well-being. So this would include things like being mindful of our eating behaviors, cooking at home more often, really being present and enjoying our food, eating meals with others, using food labels, and limiting foods high in sodium, sugars, and saturated fat. So over the next few slides, I'm going to be taking some time to kind of dive deeper into these topics in particular. So when it comes to being mindful of our eating behaviors, I find, in some ways it kind of tends to be a bit easier said than done. With everyone living just such busy lives nowadays, it's really easy for us to become distracted and not pay full attention to our eating behaviors, right? So mindful eating is a very important skill to develop as part of an overall overall healthy lifestyle. So being mindful of our eating habits really quite simply means being aware of, number one, how we're eating. So did we eat slowly or quickly? Were we distracted or were we eating with others? Why we're eating. So are we truly hungry or are we just eating out of boredom? What we're eating, what are the foods and drink choices we're making? When we're eating, so what time is it? How long has it been since you had your last meal or snack? Where we're eating, were you actually in a space that was meant for eating, or were you eating, on the couch or in bed or wherever it may be? And then lastly, too, how much we're actually eating. So how much food did we have at that one sitting? So overall, being mindful of our eating habits can really help us make healthier choices more often, make positive, impactful changes to our eating behaviors and routines, be more conscious of our food choices and eating habits, and to reconnect the eating experience by creating awareness of our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors during these times. And this is really such a beneficial skill to develop. And I really encourage all of you to think about some of those questions the next time you have a meal. Okay, so cooking and preparing food more often at home is another important factor in developing balanced eating habits. Many of us nowadays are eating out several times per week, whether that's going out to restaurants, ordering from takeout, like through an app on your phone, let's say, or going to some sort of fast food location. And preparing meals at home, obviously it takes a little bit more time to kind of plan and prepare than simply, ordering from Uber Eats. But there's also significantly more benefits to our health and well-being from eating scratch-made meals prepared at home. So cooking and preparing our food, it allows us to learn new skills, rely less on highly processed foods, control the amount of sauces and seasonings we're adding to our foods, and really therefore control our intake of things like sodium, sugar, and saturated fat. It can also help us to save money in the long term by actually reducing the amount we're spending on meals eaten out. And then also too, it can help us, of course, choose healthy ingredients like vegetables, fruits, protein foods, and whole grains. So really making most of our everyday meals, scratch-made meals from home, while eating out every once in a while is a key factor in supporting balanced eating behaviors.